This is a behavior presentation that was originally put together for a parent training. Purpose behind it is specific to allowing individuals, parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, but in the original case, parents, access to the information of how a functional behavior assessment is put together. I think this is important because it's important and informational both to understand that you have to look at the function of the behavior rather just looking primarily at the behavior and wanting it stopped. So as you move through this PowerPoint presentation, my suggestion is that you listen to what it is that I'm saying for each slide, as well as read each slide, pause, stop, talk as a group, and then move on as you feel ready. Good luck. This first slide is highlighting what a functional behavior assessment is, or an FBA. As you see the red highlighted words, it creates a hypothesis that looks beyond behavior and function alone to focus on the root cause or the lagging skill, which we've talked about a lot in a variety of other situations. The concept behind an FBA is to truly look at what's the function of the behavior, when is it happening, what's happening before, what's happening during, and what's happening after. It's not so important that we're just looking at these areas to change up the environment, but more importantly, to realize when this happens, does this always respond as the answer in the end? And if so, that helps figure out the function of the behavior. Again, I'm not expecting you to be able to participate in completing an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, but know that when we're working on teaching new skills, as well as looking at why the behavior is happening and we're hoping to replace with a new behavior, we have to understand the original function of the behavior. So obviously just a cute cartoon, the concept that behavior is the clue, not the answer. I really need you to think of those words. Behavior is the clue, not the answer, meaning the behavior is not truly our problem. It's just the clue to what the true problem underlying might be. So again, what's the function? What's the purpose behind actually having this behavior? If you've heard me give presentations before, which at this stage of the game I'm sure you have, um, it's important for us to all understand and agree upon what a challenging behavior is. A challenging behavior is not necessarily something that causes problems that are necessarily notable or noticeable in a certain moment. Interestingly enough, something that might be a challenging behavior to me may not seem like a challenging behavior to somebody else, and likewise. It's important to know that a challenging behavior is something that interferes with a child's learning, development, and success at play, academics, and or socialization. So even if one of these areas is impacted, it's highly likely that some type of a behavior is involved. It may not be so challenging that it's hitting a variety of the areas, but a behavior in itself causes problems in one of those areas. And again, it does not need to be something so outwardly obvious. Um, in most cases, it's harmful to the child or other children, but the concept of harmful, or obviously adults as well, but the concept of harmful does not necessarily mean somebody's getting hurt. It could mean that socially or academically they're hindered. Okay, so for this slide, specific to why would a child have lagging skills, it's going to remind you about executive functioning, which means that front brain type thinking activity, which really doesn't successfully happen until around 10, language processing difficulties, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, or more importantly, inflexibility, and social interaction problems, all reasons or areas and not exclusive reasons or areas that you might see lagging skills. So if you're trying to replace a behavior, you have to keep in mind that you're also trying to teach some success in any of these areas. At this point, it will be helpful for you to stop and as a team make a list of behaviors of concern. Be careful not to make an extensive list that's so long that you don't have the ability to be able to get to or even talk about any of the behaviors during this professional development. Um, if it's so long, I would suggest you beginning to categorize some of the behaviors. And so if you have a list that includes hitting, kicking, throwing things, punching, it's likely that they all need to fall under physical aggression towards adults or peers. You can categorize that way, and that will help you with your list. All right, so from your list, the next thing I'm going to push you to do is think about baseline data. How often is this happening? How often do you feel like you see it happening? If you do not have any idea and you feel like it's random or between your group you're randomly all over the place, I suggest that at this point it's not necessarily a behavior you focus on. You'll do better focusing on a behavior that you have a good baseline for. The other portion of the baseline that I need you to start thinking about. So, if, for example, we're looking at the behavior of not staying seated, I understand that that's the least of our worries. However, let's just talk about a situation where a student will not stay seated in a group activity, keeps getting up out of the chair. If I ask you how many times this happens and you have the ability to be able to say to me, in a 5 minute activity, he or she is up out of the chair 4 minutes and 30 seconds cumulatively. So over the course of 5 minutes, they are in the chair a total of 30 seconds. Then that baseline is important for us to know, because if our goal overall is, and again, I'm a little ahead of myself, but if we're thinking of baseline and our goal overall is to replace that behavior with some type of behavior that helps them to stay seated, we have to respect and keep in mind that when they first started or as they begin with this new behavior, they are only currently 30% successful with sitting, which means us hoping that or having the goal of them sitting for 5 minutes is quite far away. So, baseline both with how often the behavior was happening and also start thinking the opposite of, as we grow this, how do we want to grow this baseline and respect where they're currently at with this current behavior? So, how unsuccessful or successful are they with the behavior you're currently looking at? All right, again, referencing your list, now let's talk about the function of the behavior. I'm sure you've looked at this before, but for some reason, when we get in the throes of the moment, we forget about where is the function of this behavior coming from, and that there is truly a function. And that, again, these are the four functions that any living thing can have a behavior for. And as you see on here, to manipulate a moment, to be mean to another person, etc., are not described. However, I do understand that sometimes behavior can look manipulated, or it can make you feel like you've been manipulated, or the behavior in itself can look mean. It doesn't necessarily mean the function of the behavior is to be mean. So, what I want you to do is to spend quite a bit of time on this slide and reacclimate yourself to, what does escape look like? What does attention seeking behavior look like? Again, if I want attention from someone, it's going to look totally different than me leaving an entire area, which would be escape. If I want access to something, and it can't necessarily be a person, although we have had a couple of individuals, very few, who their obsessive interest is people. But in most cases, this seek access to materials is truly, I'm going to have a behavior because I want to play on the iPad. I'm going to have a behavior because I want to go outside for recess. I'm going to have a behavior because I want to drink your pop. Stuff like that, not necessarily to get attention. And then the final behavior function of behavior is sensory stimulation, or stimulation, excuse me, which is specific, very specific to, for example, someone taking their shirt off because the tag is itchy. So the behavior is their shirt is taken off. The reason they're doing it is because their tag is itchy. Or someone puts their hands over their ears. The behavior is hands over ears. The reason they're doing it is because something is too loud. Someone may, or a student may make vocal noises when others are trying to concentrate, so humming or some type of a different vocal noise. And the reason they're doing it is because the vibration in their throat or the sound that it makes in their head is sensory seeking. So that's a difficult category, but it definitely does happen at times. And I'm sure some of you can give yourselves examples of that to clear up each of these categories. So pause, take some time, cover these, and get your list back out and start making some assumptions based on what type of function of behavior is attached to each of the behaviors on your current list of students. Okay, so you should have a list. You should have reminded yourself about baseline. You should now somewhat understand the function of the behavior or have a hypothesis of it. And at this point, you're moving through the functional behavior assessment. So now I want you to define the behavior with some type of a baseline. So When Susie is seated at circle and asked to participate in a 5-minute task and then describe the behavior. How often does it happen? How often do you see the behavior? That should all be in the description. So prior to this slide, your behavior might say Susie runs and gets out of a chair. To describe the behavior a little bit more specifically, you want to combine all of it together so that we can then decide what we want her to do in replacement of. So in the last slide, I mentioned the concept of what if, or is the individual student motivated for using this new replacement behavior? On this slide, I want to remind you of the concepts around how someone could or could not maybe be motivated to either change their behavior or partake in a new behavior that you might put in place. So, for example, if we're taking the seated during circle behavior or during group time as a situation that we're looking at, what makes that child motivated to stay versus continue to keep participating in escape? So, what is it that you're going to add in to help with the motivation? Um, Let me remind you that anyone, whether you're a student with a disability, a typically developing student, an adult, or someone who's 99 years old, you will not, or people will not, maintain motivation to just do something because it's good for them unless they're already 80% successful. So I think this is interesting when we think of elementary students, middle and high school students, because, say, for example, you're in the fourth grade. My guess is you're not 80% successful at being a fourth grader because you're in the fourth grade, which means a good majority of the stuff you're asked to do on a daily basis you're not successful with, which means you're likely some of the days not going to be motivated to do them. That concept of staying motivated just for the sake of goodness is the concept of cognitive perspective. So, to get me to do something that I'm not good at, you might be able to get me to cognitively understand that I should do it. However, again, if I'm not anywhere close to 80% motivated, or excuse me, 80% successful, it's going to be difficult for me to maintain motivation. I may maintain motivation though if I have a connected piece. So if my friend is with me, I may do it. Or if there's a goal that you have me oriented to. So if I'm able to complete this new activity for X amount of days, I get some type of a monetary, I get money, I get a paycheck, or maybe I get a gift card. That could matter to me. So a goal. But if I don't care that a friend is there and I don't cognitively understand it and I don't care about the goal you've set for me, I may need extrinsic motivation. The concept of extrinsic motivation gets difficult. And again, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, but basically, what the research says is if you're not close to 80% successful at something, the chances that you need to maintain motivation, some type of extrinsic motivator, is going to be high. That doesn't go away with age. You can ask a 99-year-old to try to complete something that's very difficult for them. And unless you have the ability to be able to give them some type of extrinsic motivator to partake in maintaining motivation for it, it's going to be difficult for them to do it. You maybe could include one of their friends, or you could explain to them that it's good for them. But again, keeping in mind that maintaining motivation for something just because somebody has set that up for them is very difficult. That's in typical development. It's also extremely difficult, obviously, for the students that we support. So before we move on, I need you to continue to keep that motivation piece in your mind so that you aren't reluctant to reinforce when you see approximation of the new behavior. So the start of some new behavior would mean you should give some type of reinforcement. And the best one to give when people are the least successful is some type of extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes meaning I did it because it makes me feel good later when the individual has the ability to be closer to 80% successful, frankly. Okay, so now time to teach this new behavior. We've obviously at this stage of the game decided upon a replacement behavior. It's important to it's important to respect the baseline. So how often are they currently partaking in the desirable behavior, which is likely why you're seeing the off-task behavior. And so we then have to respect that and grow it from there. Learning a new behavior is tough because typically we just want the behavior completely gone and we want the new behavior replaced and successfully there. If you are not open to looking at that baseline and progressively growing the new behavior, you're going to feel unsuccessful fast. More importantly, if you do not set the environment up appropriately and tolerate for steps in the progress towards the new behavior, you will actually bring out other behaviors attached on to the old behavior, which will become a problem for actually teaching what it is that you're hoping to teach. So if you're trying to teach sitting and in addition to now escaping, the child decides to throw the chair before they escape, you now have two behaviors that are a problem. So if you set your goals too high and you don't respect that current baseline, typically you'll add in another new behavior to have to work around. The next two slides talk specifically about task analysis. So if I'm trying to teach a new skill and I don't believe that it's a scenario where the individual that I'm working with knows all of the steps, number one, it's important to task analyze and decide, do I need to teach this portion of it for them to actually know this new behavior? So that's part of where task analysis is used. But more importantly, a good way to use task analysis is if you can break down a behavior and decide that there are 6 steps to it for completion of it successfully, then maybe that's when you start asking for them to independently slowly do some of the steps and call that progress as you move along. So if, for example, I'm asking you to stay seated, I may want you to stay seated, and I may want your feet on the floor, and I may want you looking at the teacher, and that may be 3 of the 6 steps that are included, but those 3 steps may be the first 3 steps that I ask of you. And once you have those completed, then I might allow you to leave and then take a break or escape and come back after that a different time and or come back to complete the remaining pieces of that actual behavior that I need from you when you're seated at circle or doing some type of an activity. Another way to use task analysis is to, again, backwards chain. So I showed you the example of forward chaining or kind of quickly spoke to it in that you might do the first few steps, then I'll let you leave and or I'll do the remainder for you. The other pieces, I may do the beginning part or I may help you through the beginning part, or you may not be at circle initially and then you come in after those first 3 steps are done so you don't have to complete the entire thing. The only way to know when to break the task up like that, the only way to know how, I should say, is to first task analyze. How many pieces of independence do we actually want to see in this behavior? What do we feel like makes this behavior successful? What would look successful if we saw you complete all of those steps? So that helps you break the behavior down. It helps you know when to reinforce. It also helps you know when to kind of dice it up and or share responsibility as you're teaching the skill. From an academic standpoint, if it helps you to think of academics, when math is taught, when reading is taught, even when writing a paper is taught, the task is broken down into small steps. The student is taught all of the steps as they go, and then in the end, everything is put together. So writing a story is a perfect example. First, you write the title, and you might take some time thinking about the title, and then you get a grade or you get reinforcement for, wow, good title, or try again. And then you move on to the starter sentence. Then you might move on to the first paragraph, and then you go that way progressively. If you struggle along the way, your teacher gives you help. Your teacher, gives you reinforcement, and the progress works that way because it's task analyzed out. During this slide, what I want you to do is stop talking about the behaviors of the students that you're somewhat emotionally invested to. Take a pause, watch this video clip, especially hopefully, if you have time at this stage of the game, and try the strategies without that investment of this is the student that I work with, or I know all of the information behind the student, or I feel like the function of the behavior is because they haven't eaten breakfast, for example. Which may be problematic, but probably isn't the crux of the full behavior. While you watch this YouTube clip, pay attention to defining the behavior that you see. Define the behavior exactly. So this is what I saw. This is how many times I saw it. Um, you're not going to have a baseline, but go ahead and make an assumption based on what you're seeing. What do you feel like the function of the behavior is? What do you feel like a replacement behavior for that current behavior could be? What could that little kiddo do instead of what they are currently doing um, in that situation? So, just stopping that behavior is not an answer. There needs to be some type of a replacement behavior to replace a new behavior to replace this old problematic behavior. And then pay attention to motivation. How are you going to keep this kiddo motivated to partake in your new goal, your new idea of a behavior? Do me a huge favor. Don't watch this clip and finish watching the clip by saying, my goodness, that parent just needs to, because again, that's an emotional perception and it gets your brain back off of a functional behavior assessment and it gets you in parent mode, or unfortunately society mode, where you feel like you can imply judgment on someone when really what I want you to do is focus on functional behavior assessment. Last four slides of the presentation. For these last four slides, go through them. They're just suggestions for specific functions of behavior. So if you want to go back and look at the students you've talked about, and if you're looking at a function of the behavior that is proving to be used to get attention, for example, or proving to be used to escape a situation, then use these next four slides to jog your ideas specific to, well, we could do this or we could try this. Um, Hopefully the slides are clear. I'm not going to take you through each of them, but please look through them if you're feeling like you might need to try different ideas to feed the current function of the behavior in a more appropriate manner. Keep in mind again, if the function of the behavior is escape, your replacement behavior needs to respect the need to escape. When they can escape, how they can escape, if they can escape, and how often they can escape is your control, under your control, and your responsibility. So you're not just straight up letting them escape exactly how they would want to, but you have to respect that that's what the function of the behavior currently is. All right, good job. Well done. You've completed your first YouTube professional development from me. Again, I'm assuming that this is quite redundant if you've had any training with me before, and I hope it is. I hope that I continue to deliver the same message for you, and I hope that it's becoming clearer as you keep hearing it. This last slide is to, again, remind yourself that you may still have behavior questions specific to what it is that you're currently doing. If you do have behavior questions, write them down, email them, and specifically include where in the presentation or where in the current plan you're getting confused. Thanks, and have a good rest of your professional development day.